All right, Mike, welcome back on the Celtics Beat.
Thanks, Larry. Nice to be with you.
It really is great to have you back on. Well, we know where we're starting here, obviously, that DeAndre Jordan thing. It was sort of the story in the NBA last week. We can get into the transpirings and why everyone is still talking about it, being it did happen 10 days ago now. But from a concrete standpoint, just sort of discuss what this does for the Clippers, along with some of their other offseason moves. Obviously, we know who they picked up. Even Josh Smith as well. Where does this put them back in the NBA landscape here, particularly in the Western Conference?
Well, how about the magic of Doc Rivers? I mean, 10 days ago, he's, somebody who can't coach and GM at the same time. I'm sure all that was going to be questioned. And now he's going to be GM of the year, if not R.C. Buford again in San Antonio with what Doc's been able to do. Now you consider it, re-sign DeAndre Jordan, make a trade for Lance Stevenson, not only make a trade for Lance Stevenson, but traded the Clippers' two least productive players among their first eight, in Spencer Hawes and Matt Barnes, and a contract to Spencer Hawes they probably were going to regret based on how poorly he played a year ago. Then they go out and get Wesley Johnson, which is kind of a freebie. And now to go out and get Josh Smith in addition to that, and I'm even forgetting Paul Pierce. I mean, the Clippers are now a deep, deep squad. Like last year, they had the most efficient starting five in the NBA, but you went one click to the bench and it got bad in a hurry. And I mean, really got bad. Now, there were people who played well in the playoffs, like Austin Rivers had a career playoff game in one of those series, and Matt Barnes even had a good first round against San Antonio. And we know what happened to him in the second round. They collapsed and, stopped playing to win and got a little tentative, and it caught them. But I got to believe, Larry, along with San Antonio, Golden State, they are one of the three best teams in basketball on paper. I mean, going into next season, the East Coast people will say Cleveland's going to be great again, which is true. I think Miami's going to be good. Chicago's going to be good in the East. But I think those are the three best teams in basketball. And I haven't even mentioned Houston, who stayed the same, other than losing Josh Smith. Memphis basically stayed the same. And somebody else. Oklahoma City's healthy. That's a good basketball team. I mean, it's always mind-boggling to me how the NBA is the most beautifully marketed industry in the world with regards to their timing. The moment the finals end, you got the draft. The draft concludes, you got a week, you got free agency. Free agency ends, and you got summer league. Summer league finishes, and basically you got a month off, and you're getting after it. So no wonder it's the fastest growing sports industry in the world.
And you haven't even mentioned the schedule release, and we kind of sort of laugh at it. Obviously, I do. I mean, I am interested in when the schedule does come out because, I'm one of those people who plans my life a little bit well ahead of time. But when this schedule does come out, whatever it may be, I think it's probably going to be first week of August. I mean, it is going to be an event, and we're going to be literally talking about the schedule for a week, certainly on this show as well, and that's going to be a big deal in itself as well. And you're right, it's only going to be about 3 weeks where it's going to be a little quiet, and that's fine. That's what Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod's for.
And I just came back from NBA meetings. There were rumblings, rumors, mumblings, whatever you want to call them, that whether it starts this year or next year, they're going to try and start sooner. They're going to try and extend the season by a week on the tail end, maybe increase it or start it sooner, 2 weeks on the front end, and try and eliminate like the 4 games in 5 nights and eliminate the majority of the back-to-backs. And this Adam Silver guy, he's on top of it. He's kind of like, you know what, our players are our greatest asset, and we're going to keep them healthy. We're going to keep them playing hard and make them every night, be able to put the most out for their fans. And so there were rumblings of that. I don't know that that's going to happen immediately this year, but if it doesn't, I certainly think it would happen by the following season.
I think that's probably almost surely going to happen with the new CBA. That's going to be something the league will probably give players. Me personally, I'm not sure I'd be a huge fan of that because I think the biggest weakness for the NBA is the regular season, and you see it with San Antonio every year. The regular season right now is too much of an extended preseason. And I mean, I'd like to see these regular season games matter a little more. And if you sort of stretch these games out even more, I think that could be, you know, a hindrance in itself. I personally would like to see less games and possibly even less playoff spots, or a greater incentives for teams, like getting like a first round bye or something, or whatnot. So that would be something I would, you know, be a little concerned about if they do stretch the season out.
No, those are all good thoughts. You know, I played in Europe, and in both the Spanish A-League and the Italian A-League, they had 20 teams, and the bottom two, if you finished 19th or 20th, it was the bottom four. Go figure this. The bottom four who finish 17, 18, 19, and 20 have a little playoff series amongst themselves. I think 17 played 20 and 18 played 19, to determine which two teams would go down to the B League, and the two top teams from the B League would climb up to the A League, or, I mean, I guess it's like the equivalent of the NBA and the NBA D League or something like that, or the CBA before it happened. But there's a lower level league, and the top two teams in that league get to climb up into the A League, which meant more sponsorship, more television. And so there was no such thing as tanking. There was no such thing as that. I mean, you were playing every game like it mattered. And I wish there was some sort of a format that would work like that. And I wish also that they would seed the teams 1 through 16 regardless of conference. I know that the purists and the historians would have a fit with that, but I just think with today's schedule and airplanes, and you know, you could even do the first rounds, the 2-3-2 format or whatever, and just keep the semis and the finals the 2-2-1-1-1. You could do that. That way you don't have the Clippers playing San Antonio in the first round last year, which was an epic series, and I thought, you know, the San Antonio went home. San Antonio probably would have given Golden State the best series last year, and they would have swept that Cleveland team. But they were sitting home.
Well, that's because that's sort of my gripe is San Antonio plays the regular season. They really don't care. They sort of just cruise right along. They pick things up in March when they go out on that rodeo trip, because they know that they're going to, you know, just be wherever in the postseason anyways. I think that if, you know, maybe you go back to that mini-series that they had in the 80s with a first round, I know you're sacrificing gate money and everything and TV revenue, but if you go back to that mini-series where if you're playing for things like a division championship equals a first-round bye, then you're going to see San Antonio play, say, Dallas or Houston in the middle of February or whatever, and that's a game that's going to mean a lot more because it could decide a tiebreaker for winning a division or whatnot. And obviously, Popovich is so interested in resting players, he'd want to maybe skip like a first-round playoff series, as teams did back in the 70s and the 80s. As you know, the Lakers and the Celtics did not have to play first-round series back then because they would win their division, and that was actually the big thing. Philly and Boston, everybody remembers those great playoff games that they had, Mike. But there were these they had very good regular season games around like 80, 81, 82 because they mattered. You win the division, you skip 3 games in the early first round, and you're rested for the second round of the conference finals. I think something like that, you know, and like I said, you're sacrificing gate money, but all the games in the 5 months leading up to the playoffs means infinitely more than they do now.
Interesting. No, those are all good thoughts. That all just preceded me before I got into the league. But yeah, some of that we forget. I think it would be hard for them to go back on that. I think the league and the players' union bargained for that when the players said we want less of a training camp. Not a whole month of training camp. We want a week of training camp. And then the league came back and said, well, we want all playoff series to be 7 games. That's the gate you're talking about.
I remember that. I know. It squeezes a little money out.
Anyway, I think the league is healthy. You got great players. You got great teams. I love the fact that Golden State won. And I love that they did it by, you know, being innovative, and Steve Kerr, a first-time coach. And, you know, they go from passing the ball the fewest on their side of half court a year ago under Mark Jackson to passing the ball the most or the second most on their side of half court this year, and they walk away the world champs.
Well, I didn't even know that.
With very few personnel changes. I mean, just Sean Livingston, just Barbosa. I mean, it was basically the same group.
Yeah, it was basically almost none, and I was actually even going to ask you that regarding the Clippers. They made Golden State, when I say they, I mean, they lost the Clippers in the first round last year. We're talking about an epic first-round playoff series, or 2 years ago, or 2014, whatever you want to call it. They lost. They made the coaching change, and they were in that, middle of the West Pack, anywhere between 3 to 6. They're a perpetual, very good team. Could you see that with the Clippers, where they're right now, they're good enough to kind of be in the mix, but could you see them make that Golden State leap where they're at the top of the conference and truly contending for a championship next year?
It's very interesting. They're soured based on what happened last year and afflicted again, and they are going to have to get over that burden or that hurdle. That was kind of what was following this team and following a Chris Paul and a Blake Griffin is, okay, they cannot win a big one, or they cannot get past them, or they're going to choke. And if you really looked at the 3 previous years, not this year, but the 3 previous years, they basically threw away opportunities to do it. I guess we could exclude the year they get swept by San Antonio, so that's going back 4 years maybe. But like up 2-0 on Memphis and lose. 2 years ago, tied 2-2 with Oklahoma City and up 9 in Game 5 in Oklahoma with 1:15 to go and lost. And that destroyed them, and they came home and couldn't overcome it. That next game was 2 days later, and they just couldn't, put that other one out of their minds. And then, of course, this year's collapse against Houston. But I thought, like most people, when they beat San Antonio and did the unthinkable, which was win Game 4 in San Antonio, win Game 6, an elimination game in San Antonio, and then go back home and win Game 7, where they played phenomenal, and Chris makes a game winner, and Blake Griffin has Elgin Baylor-like numbers in that first series, like 25 and 14 and 8 assists. He was ridiculous. I mean, everyone in our organization and out west thought, these guys have done it. This is the year. They're past the burdens. They just beat Goliath, who was their nemesis, the smart veteran team that had the great coach, and they outdueled them in a masterful duel, only to succumb the same way to Houston. Up 3-1 and even up 3-2 and up 19 in the third quarter at home, and let it slip late in the third and let it slip. They started that fourth quarter up 13 and let it slip. Remember, James Harden didn't even play with about 16 minutes to go. I think he went in for some final free throws. That was debilitating. It destroyed their confidence again. So can they? They're knocking on the door. They now have all the tools. The one thing I did not think they had, Larry, was enough length to beat the best teams in the West. Like Chris Paul is short. Blake Griffin has short arms. J.J. Redick is short with short arms. They don't have length. And all the teams the last 3-4 years in the West who make the finals are teams with great length at their wing positions. San Antonio with Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard, they had length, not to mention Duncan's length, but Golden State had 4 wing defenders this last year, versatile 6'7" to 6'8" guys if you throw Klay Thompson in with Iguodala and Barnes and Draymond Green. Length, Oklahoma City 3 years prior gets to the finals. Length. And I just kept looking at our guys, and I'm like, we're not long enough. We're not. They throw long defenders on our shooters, and it causes us fits. Well, now we got some length. Josh Smith gives you length. Wes Johnson gives you length. Paul Pierce, even though he's at the end, is not a short-armed shooter. He's kind of a long, silky, smooth scorer who can still get his shot off. So all of a sudden, we got a little bit of length and depth to go with the foundation. And I only mean length on the wing. Obviously, I realize DeAndre Jordan is as long as they come. But I didn't know. I would be the first one to tell you, I don't know if we're long enough to win a title. But now I'm saying deep enough, long enough, can we do it? And the question is, you got to incredibly confident Golden State team now, which is going to be tough to beat, and San Antonio that just looks like they're not only empowered, but they've bolstered, themselves with Aldridge and David West to be tough as nails. It's going to be one heck of a fight.
It's always been sort of a mental thing. You mentioned that with the Clippers now, at least for the past 3 years. You talked about adding Pierce. He has to at least contribute to that, to what's the word I'm looking for? Not just, the mental aspect of the team, but the intangible process of the team, as he did with Washington last year. He was the only guy making any baskets for them when it mattered in the fourth quarter. I mean, you have to think Pierce is going to aid that cause for LA.
I totally agree. Even though, he's winding down, how many big shots did he take and make, and just the threat of having him out there will provide opportunities and take a little pressure off Chris and JJ and Blake, and in those moments at the end of games when you kind of know where the ball's going. This is another guy that they have to guard and respect, and I think Paul's crazy confidence will be great for them. Chris Paul's confident in a different way. Not like, give me the ball, I'm going to make the shot kind of guy. It's just, he's not going to turn the ball over. You can throw the ball to him. You trust where that ball's going to go once it gets to him. It's a different kind of confidence. But Paul is just one of those gutsy, I can do this regardless, of being 37 or 38. And so he's going to be good for the guys. And, of course, the existing relationship with Doc will help. Doc won't overuse Paul Pierce during the regular season. I'm sure he'll probably start him, but he'll probably play 20 minutes a night and then ramp up for the playoffs.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed, too, and I hate mentioning this with Doc, is, you were talking about, the mental aspect of the Clippers. I personally didn't think those Celtics teams, when Doc was coaching, I didn't think they were good at closing games. They were good that championship year. To an extent, they struggled in the playoffs, particularly early on. Pierce is very good, but we all know there was a lot of Paul Pierce isolation plays. Do you think that there's anything to this regarding Doc Rivers in terms of, having teams that do struggle to put the foot on other teams' necks? Because the Celtics blew a couple series when he was coaching. The Magic, if you want to go way back, they had a 3-1 lead against Detroit one year. They never really did anything in the postseason. We know of some of the recent failures of the Clippers. Can you attribute any of that to Doc Rivers, or am I reaching in that aspect there?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look and watch those games, and since I wasn't broadcasting those games, I wasn't maybe watching them as intimately as I might have. I do know they had a home game against Cleveland and LeBron, where LeBron in a game 6 went nuts, right, and had like a 45-point game. That was just
that was
like
the
ridiculous.
last time I was ever drunk, sadly, so I barely remember that night. I just remember waking up the next day with like this terrible feeling in my stomach, because it was like, oh, they lost that game last night. That's how I knew that they blew that game. But yeah, they beat Miami in a game 5. I know they were vastly inferior talent-wise to that Miami team, but everybody thought that the Celtics were going to win that 6th game at home. Came out, I know LeBron went nuts, but they laid an egg. The Celtics just did not show up. They had the 3-2 lead in the Lakers. They had a 3-2 lead on Orlando. They couldn't. They actually, the funny stat I remember that 09 Orlando series was, the Celtics will win because there's something like 35-0 when the team takes a 3-2 lead in a series. They've never lost a series when they've had a 3-2 lead. And then I think in 2009, 2010, and 2012, the Celtics blew 3-2 series leads in all of them.
That's what we get for coming up with those stats.
I know.
Those things happen. But no, I think Doc's a great leader. Doc is in the top echelon of coaches. One of only, 4 in our league, maybe 5 now with Steve Kerr to currently have won a title. You oftentimes can't control what the other great players do. I think one of those Orlando games, Turkoglu went crazy, against the Laker teams that you're talking about in 9-10 or whatever, when they didn't get there or didn't win it all. You're going against Kobe and Gasol. You're going against 2 Hall of Famers who
Shot
you know,
6 for 24.
Have enough fortitude that sometimes they make it happen regardless of what you do. And there's just so much of that. There's such a fine line. The game of golf is like that too. I mean, it's a game of inches.
I would
know.
We would all know.
You would know for sure. You would know, and I would know. You have days.
The difference between a bad read, you have no idea what you're talking about. Don't ever speak to me again, or you're unbelievable. Right? I'm sure you don't give any of that, right?
No, but we don't have caddies at my course, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I do, and sports is so like that. I was just watching the Wimbledon final and watched Federer breeze through all the rounds to get to the finals, and he comes up against Djokovic, who's had his number of late, and Federer, who served his way through the championship. Best he served in 4 years. And it was proven statistically. He talked about it. And sure enough, in the moments when he needed first serves in, like 0.1 of the first set tiebreaker, 0.1 of game one of the second set tiebreaker, same thing. He didn't double fault, but he went to second serves and allowed, it failed him by an inch, by 2 inches. And people, look at the whole match and say, oh, Djokovic won 3-1. It was never close. And I beg to differ. When I watch sports live and watch what really happens and watch how close it could have gone another way, I'm like, oh, my gosh. If he had gotten that serve in and started the tiebreaker up 1-0 instead of down 1, or, there's so many little things. Golf is the greatest example because the difference of making a putt and missing a putt is huge.
As the Pacino speech says, life is a game of inches, and you talk too when if one thing goes one way, you look at it from sort of a singular standpoint, but in reality that can have a domino effect on the rest of the game and the rest of everything. Obviously too, golf. I mean, like, you can come up 1 yard short with a club, it rolls all the way down the hill and everything. Same thing basketball. If sometimes one free throw, one foul being called just sort of changes the complexion of an entire game. I mean, if there was
Here's the best example of that. LeBron James, is one offensive rebound by Chris Bosh and a miraculous three by Ray Allen from being labeled the biggest choker in all of basketball. He's one play, and on the other end of that great rebound by Bosh and a kick out to Ray, who's immaculate and incredible preparation, getting to the arena at 3 o'clock, 4 hours before the game, and rehearsing shots and knowing where his feet should be, allowed him to make that shot. On the other end, seconds before, is Ginobili going 1 for 2 and Kawhi Leonard going 1 for 2. So
people
how
forget
differently?
About the Ginobili one too, because they were up like 5. And
I said Ginobili.
I know, but people you mentioned.
Oh, they forget about it. You're right. Everyone remembers Kawhi because it was later.
Leonard, but people forget about Ginobili because at the time they were up 5 and he missed it out. It doesn't matter. The game's over.
And so LeBron's now 2 for 6 in the finals, right? Yeah. So if that doesn't happen, or any one of those things by inches changes, LeBron is all of a sudden 1 for 6 in the finals, and his only win is over the first-time final participant, Oklahoma City. And in my opinion, he becomes our modern-day Elgin Baylor, the greatest physical talent who can't close the deal.
And it would have been a big deal mentally on him. I mean, he got those 2 championships back-to-back, particularly with how well he played in Game 7 against San Antonio. He had a great game, like 36, 37 points. So that's like, oh, LeBron's this great big-time player. He had that Game 7 against San Antonio. There was a game he had against Detroit way back. Obviously, those Celtics games as well. But you're right. I mean, if that doesn't happen, he's 1 out of 5, and he's constantly living that day after day after day after day. And that would be, catastrophic mentally, in my opinion.
Absolutely. It would define him to this day. There would be Kobe with 5 titles. There would be, the Spurs with another title. The Spurs would have 6. How would we then think of Duncan? We might call Duncan the greatest of the last 30 years.
Yeah. But then you can even say, who knows if the Spurs come back as hungry in 2014 if they got that 13 championship, because clearly their failure in 13 was like that drove their championship the next year. I mean, maybe I'm
for
wrong,
sure.
they did. Hey,
for sure. But one shot.
It is. One really quick question before we go.
Yeah.
They're not quick, but I tell you, I mean, it seems for whatever reason the Clippers seem to get obviously now with this DeAndre Jordan situation and how it went down, they probably seem to get the most ire from opposing teams, fans, even media. It's almost like they're the Duke of the NBA without winning the winning a championship yet. I mean, do you think that is there anything really to that in terms of or that just you just sort of put that aside and say, hey, it's just people that are upset?
I think they're one of the most unliked teams. I do. Now, their fan base has grown all over the country, so we have Clipper fans who show up in every arena. But for whatever reason, what you're talking about is real. I sense it. I see it. I get it on my Twitter account, If I make any sort of a praising comment about a Clipper, people are just clamoring back and forth, saying, what about this, what about this, what about this? He doesn't deserve it yet. He hasn't done anything. I mean, they're really, I think part of it is, I think it's threefold, maybe fourfold. Number one, their terrible history and the owner who was all part of that history. Okay, so that's at the foundation of all this. Not likable, that owner, and their history spoke for itself. The next was their comportment during Blake Griffin's first 2 years. And combine it with the fact that he's humiliating people with dunks. And people didn't like that. Players didn't like that. Opposing fans didn't like that. But what they didn't like more was the fact that they complained a lot. So Blake is young in the league and DJ's young in the league, and they're not getting calls, and they're complaining and they're whining. And it was a big part of their on-court demeanor, and I hated it. I hated having to broadcast it because I was like, God, they're crying over every call. They need to just shut up and play. And then the final thing is they still haven't been past the second round, yet Chris Paul and Blake Griffin are two of the most marketed athletes in the country. And so I think there's a little bit of that jealousy factor from other players, like, what the heck? They haven't done anything. They haven't done anything. They're just in L.A. They haven't done anything. Yeah, he's a good dunker, and he's an all-league performer. And, yeah, Chris is, one of the 4 best point guards in the game, but he hasn't done anything. And so when they're on national ads everywhere, until Steph Curry's taken over the world this year, but I mean, I think that's a part of it too. So that won't stop. Plus they're winning now, so people love to root against a winner.
Well, the good thing is if you makes you feel any better, they have a long way to go before they reach New England Patriots territory, I guess, in terms of really getting teams or other opposing anyone, not even football fans, ticked off regarding them. But Michael Smith, great chatting you once again. Now entering your 18th year, I believe, at Fox Sports and the prime tickets covering the Clippers.
Larry, let me close with this, because Tom Brady's my favorite football player. Okay, and I'm a former quarterback in high school, and I broke every record in California as a high school quarterback. You know what I did before every ball game?
Deflated the football.
I deflated or inflated the ball to my liking every football, and we had 3 which were designated for the offense. There were 2 that were designated to the kicking game, and the 3 were marked A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3. I had all 3 balls exactly the same, and I will tell you this, they were not inflated to a maximum or inflated to a certain number. They were they were prepared by me and then given to the ball boy to my liking. And I don't have big hands. I got small hands. So, I mean, I don't know. When I watch this whole thing and such a big deal being made out of it, I'm like, who cares? Every quarterback's probably done that their whole life, high school, college. I mean, who doesn't want to throw a ball the way it is? But whatever. I'm sure the balls were prepared for the Super Bowl, and he got that done too. I think the guy's a genius. Nobody could have done what he did in the world last year. And I'm talking about being down 2 touchdowns to the Ravens twice and came back to win that game, and being down like he was in the Super Bowl and came back to win that game. Nobody in the world could do what he did.
Well, suffice to say, we were talking about how, you know, there's only 3 weeks where there's no NBA talk. I'm pretty sure once this Brady ruling comes out, that will cover that, you know,
for sure.
That's getting numbers. So the NBA season's here. Oh, all right. But Mike, great chatting you once again. Look forward to talking to you during the season, and keep killing up on the links, man. I'll try. I just want to hit like Jordan Spieth. I've been putting left hand low ever since I watched him win the Masters, and I'm telling you what, I haven't missed a 5-footer in 6 weeks. He's the man. All right. You are for coming on this show, Mike. Thanks once again. Michael Smith, everybody on Celtics Beat. We'll be back in a few moments.